Tell me a little bit about what you do at 1070 Architecture, your role at the studio, and your career path leading up to that to date.
In 1070 architecture, one of the roles that I have is I QC pretty much all of the projects. Every project that goes through the design process, from site analysis all the way to the construction drawings, QC every project, making sure that they have all the standards, especially the one that goes before submittal to the city of San Diego, all of the notes, all of the requirements, like minimum requirements per the code. And at the same time, then that's when I also take over completely on the project and I go through the entire submittal process. So that's my role in 1070 architecture. I got into this because my past experience, I went to school for architecture and engineering. And when we moved to the city of San Diego, I got the opportunity to work for the Development Services Department. Because of my background, I ended up being a plan reviewer. My plan review used to be for most of the projects were residential homes, and that was over the counter, which meant that the client is right in front of you as you're plan checking their projects. Those used to be for the smaller projects, which now the city calls rapid review. During that process, I learned how to plan check for what they call combined review, and it used to be for water and sewer, minor structural review, and stormwater. At the same time, we will review bigger projects, the projects that were submitted. Through that process, I also learned how to issue permits. Very small projects, like they're little over-the-counter projects. Clients will come in instead of going through the line. They will come through us. If I was the last reviewer, I can issue the permit if everybody has signed off their project and completed the stamp transfer. So I learned that process of the stamp transferring and all of that in that group, which allowed me to get into the next position at the city, which it was a supervising project review specialist. And that one, switched groups from plan review to intake. And in the intake process, that's where everybody will come in, set up their projects. And it was before COVID, 2020. It used to be in person. So people will bring their plans, somebody will take a quick look and set up the project and route it for plan review. So I used to supervise that in that section, and I learned a little bit more about what it took to intake a permit. A few months later after that, I ended up getting a different position, and that was called Development Project Manager. And it was for what we call ministerial projects, and it were bigger projects. So in that process, I actually dived in more and was able to learn the different divisions of the Development Services Department. That's when you learn how this group, like let's say the planning review group, was in this planning division versus the combined reviewer or structural when there's life and safety divisions. Each person reviews per their specific specialty, and all of that kind of gets combined into what you eventually get comprehensive comments and be able to respond to them according to the code. I also got to learn how to set up a big project, issue a big project, coordinate conflict resolution meetings, and speak with like the different reviewers, the different disciplines, and what they were looking for to be able to help the client from the inside. That was kind of my role in that position.
How do you think that the experience working at the Development Services Department helps you now in your role as a permit specialist at 1070 Architecture? Because it seems to me that, well, one, talking to Sean, it seems that a lot of other San Diego architecture studios don't have a dedicated permitting person. And then even if they do, they don't have, the background that you do. So how do you feel like it helps you in your day to day? Because I feel like it gives you a very unique perspective.
The way it helps me, I think, since I got to work inside and I saw how the departments or the divisions actually move and what it took to do different types of projects, that's kind of the one insight that I have. In the city of San Diego, you have what people call permit facilitators. When I was working there, I saw these permit facilitators that will take in plans from the different architectural companies and run the permitting through that process. Actually, Sean, before I started working for 1070 Architecture, he used to hire one of those facilitators. But one of the things that he noticed that he lacked was that control to be able to communicate with the reviewers. He would have to give the plans to the permit facilitator and then gets the comments. And when he asked the permit facilitator for maybe some more information, it wasn't happening. It was just the person would just drop in the plans, got the comments, here you go, response, and let me know when you want me to submit them again. The way we do it now is an integrated process, And since we do it in-house, we try to help our clients, and we all understand the project design at this point. Every design meeting with the clients, and my background in architecture allows me to understand the design process. And at the same time, as we're designing, what items might come up in permitting, and we try to give the heads up to the clients, depending on the project design and the scope of the work. I think that's one of the things that does help us, and it's a very good process that we have in that we can all work together. I'm able to communicate with the designers immediately when we get a comment. I go through every comment, review them, and if we see any comment that looks like a red flag, we might have to communicate this with the client to see how we can approach. It's something that we can do as soon as I get the comments instead of waiting to send you the comments all at once. That is something that I think gives us a little bit of an advantage.
I would say it's a huge advantage for sure. Now, I want to dive into the specifics of the permitting process, but before we do that, could you give the people watching a high level overview of your personal professional opinion on the state of permitting in San Diego? I know probably most people watching this will know that Sean, the principal of the studio, I think it's fair to say he's not a fan, but I'd be curious your perspective because I don't think we've talked about it too much directly.
I think the reason why maybe Sean is not a fan is because as an architect, our jobs is to, provide a high level of service when it comes to design and architecture and walk a client through the entire process. And when they're done with their project, they're really happy with the outcome. And what ends up happening with the permitting is that it can be a little bit obstructive at times. And sometimes when you're submitting a project that seems in your mind as an architect or a designer or engineer, pretty straightforward and simple, once it goes through the permitting process, you have somebody on the other end that maybe thinks the opposite. The code is extensive. It keeps growing every day. Things get more complicated over time, and the requirements keep increasing. Sometimes something that you did 3 months ago or 6 months ago that you said that was okay, not a problem, we got it through, in the next submittal, it is not the case. It might become actually the portion of the project that you have to be like, we're going to have to change the strategies here or maybe redesign a little bit to be able to comply to this new requirement. So I think that's one of the things that as architects and designers and developers or homeowners is seen as very disruptive.
Interesting. And I do know when you went to NJIT, you were actually a dual major, I believe, right? It was architecture and engineering.
I have a bachelor's in architecture and a master's in civil engineering. In civil engineering, I was more concentration in construction management as well. It gave me that perspective to understand kind of a little bit of engineering as well.
I brought that up because you do seem to have a very well-rounded perspective, whereas to your point, like an architect maybe doesn't see at certain times like the big picture and the different perspectives of everyone else involved, especially the city's perspective. So let's talk about the permitting process here. Starting with, can you define for the viewers what exactly a ministerial permit is and what types of projects are going to require this type of permit?
So the way that the city describes ministerial is the project, they call it a process one, or the project that is by right, which means if you have a single home and there's certain overlays that does not kick you into the other type of permitting, you can have drawings drawn by an architect after the design is complete and you have the minimum requirements for the code, both the municipal code as well as the California residential code or building code. You can submit it and you should be able to get a comprehensive plan check, comments, and respond accordingly and get your permit, your plan stamped and ready for construction.
Got it. And then, so, imagine if I was a prospective client here, why don't you walk me through what the, major steps of the permitting process? You already touched upon it a little bit, but feel free to go a bit deeper because one, I know it can be very extensive, and two, I do know it can take a long time. So, what exactly should people know about the permitting process if they're considering starting a project that's going to require one?
So the permitting process, the way it works is once you have plans, there are construction drawings, and you usually will need, for most projects, architectural plans energy calculations, which is a requirement in California for energy compliance, as well as structural drawings. If it's a very simple project, you might be able to do it without structural drawings. Once you have that package together, and if it's a simple lot, you might not need any other consultants. And then before we submit, we have to make sure that we have that package together, as well as this minimum submittal requirements. There are a few forms that we have to fill out. Let's say one of them is the water meter data card, which kind of tells you how much fixture counts you have and if you are able to keep the existing 3/4 inch meter. Most homes have a 3/4 inch meter. Some of them have been upgraded over the time, so that lets you know, I'm good with it, I don't need another permit. There's other forms like the stormwater quality form, as well as the minor water pollution form. Those forms tell the reviewer this is a low priority type of project. We don't need other documentation. And then once we have all the forms together, we have to go. The City of San Diego has a process for a software called Accela. You have to have a profile and be able to upload your documents there. If your project, for example, is over 45 years old, you're going to need a plan review, which means you need another set of documents, which we call the photographic survey, that has to get submitted separately with the building record from the County of San Diego. That has to get submitted so they can determine if your project is potential historic or not. Once it's uploaded, you have to either schedule a virtual meeting for the city staff to set up your project based on your scope of work, on the plans, the documents that you submitted. And that's when they provide you with the first initial plan check invoice. After the plan check invoice process happens, the client has to then pay that invoice for the city to be able to commence their plan review. So, for example, if I were to submit my project today and I don't pay for a month from now, the city is not going to start any plan review until that payment has been completed. That delays your project from the beginning if you don't do that. After the first plan review, you get a round of comments. Depending on the type of project, you might get fees. That could be water and sewer fees, or it could be they give you other comments for other type of like impact fees, depending on the scope of work. So for example, let's say if I'm submitting an ADU, the ADU would require for you to pay water and sewer capacity fees. That means I will have to reach out to the reviewer and say, once I get the comments, hey, can you please send me this invoice? So I know I have it on record, I can forward that to the client. Then you have what they call impact fees. Then there's different strategies. A lot of homes qualify for what they call affordable ADUs. So sometimes it waives the impact fees. That's kind of the current code that allows us to do this. So depending, after you have back and forth of plan reviews, coordination with the staff, depending on the type of comments that you get, or if they require extra documentation, like a property survey, then everybody signs off the project, goes to another, I call it digital stamp transfer. Each review goes back and double checks that everything that they approve is there on those plan sets, and then they tell you that it's ready for permit issuance. Once you get that it says everything is complete, review is complete on the permitted status, that's when you are able to request the permit issuance process. Step, you will get any like school fees requirements, any other type of documentation like the application, who's gonna be the contractor, or if it's gonna be a owner builder type of project. And you have to submit all of that before the city actually gives you a stamp set. So there's a long process and little steps that happen as you keep moving along.
3 rapid fire questions coming up here. I know there's probably a lot more context you could add to each of these, but just so viewers could have a quick general idea of what goes into this. So, could you talk a little bit more about the specific ballpark timeline for permitting these types of projects? So, for example, the main projects you guys do, ADUs slash like the multi-developing ADUs, the major remodels, the custom homes. How long should people expect the permitting process to take for each project, ballpark wise?
That is a little bit of a hard question, just because we have projects that have gone through in 3 months. It's a straightforward. The review is very quick. They review comments back on time, which is another aspect of it. In the city of San Diego, a regular residential project does not qualify for express, so you cannot pay extra to get your comments back faster or shorten the time. Most likely your project is going to be delayed a month, depending on the department and the discipline. And we have gone for projects for like over 6 months for a ministerial project. And that happens a lot if you have a project where the city staff says you're in high fire severity zone, or you have a property that has brush management. Reviewers require more information, that you have to maybe hire another consultant that you were probably not expecting. Sometimes we might think about it at the beginning, but we let the clients know maybe we want to confirm that once we get the submittal, the first round of comments, to see how it goes. Depending on the client, some clients are willing to wait a little bit longer. Some clients, they don't, so we try to get it upfront. So it all varies depending on your location of your project, the scope of work, and at the same time, how busy the city is. The reviewer that gets to review your project, just keep in mind that reviewing are people, and they have varieties of experiences. So a person that is more experienced might be able to give you a project quicker. A person who is brand new might be a little bit more cautious, might give you comments that sometimes do not apply to your project. And when that happens, you pretty much have to always go back to the reviewer before you even respond, be able to confirm that they understand that that doesn't apply.
Okay, yeah, definitely very hard to give an easy answer to that one because there's so much variability that goes into it. My next question then, though, on that front would be, what does the client's involvement look like during the permitting phase of the project? Because I know, for example, you're in all the meetings with the clients along with Sean. So I'm just curious, what does the client's role look like? Do they really not have to do much? You just tell them what to do or what's going to be happening, and then they pay the invoice accordingly? Or do they have more input?
So the way I try to do it, which is a little bit hard, I try to explain it at the beginning. We're going to have the three steps, which it will be intake, the plan review process, where sometimes we might have to get some feedback from them. There will be invoices in there. As I'm getting invoices, like an ADU, I know I'm going to get a water and sewering invoice. Send it to you at that point, because they can make the decision, I pay now or I pay at the end. And then right before the end, that we're going to get two other type of invoices, which is the extra plan check invoice fees for anything that was not captured at the beginning of the intake, and a final invoice when the permit is issued. From my end, as I'm going through the process of review, I let the clients know your plans have been submitted to the City of San Diego. We're in the queue, or I already set up an appointment to set up the project on this day. As soon as I get that done, you will get an invoice. Once I get the invoice, I said, this is the plan check invoice. This needs to get paid. The city has a clause that says you have to pay within 2 days. This will initiate the plan check process. And then I try to, depending, almost every week, once a week, give them an update. We have like a tracker that we use where I kind of go through and says the project has been assigned, the project's been reviewed, the project requires recheck comments. I try to keep them in the loop, because if not, there will be a lot of waiting time and we'll be a little bit lost what's going on. They might think that we forgot their project. But sometimes clients, depending on how involved they want to be, some of them will say, can you send me the comments? What happens sometimes is when we send the comments, something that is minor for us, that we think this is not that big of a deal, they might think it's a big deal. So you have to be very careful. So we coordinate in-house where we say, the client wants the comments, these are the comments, I'm going to send them to them, because most likely they're going to follow up with questions. So I keep going through that process pretty much all the way until the end. And right before the end, they get a lot of like, you need to do a school fees. And I usually try to assess their fees, how much it is, because I know what it is per square foot. I upload that to the school district, and tell them pay. There's a lot of paying. There's a lot of school fee pay, plan check fee pay, that sometimes the clients get confused. And even though you explain where they're going to be payments, like I had a client recently said, I feel like I just keep paying the city over and over and over because it just looks like you're paying and paying and paying, but you still don't have your plans. So that's kind of where sometimes clients get confused, because it seems like so many little steps to get to the final line.
On that note, what are the costs people should expect to pay for their project just based on the permitting aspect alone?
Well, costs have increased this year at least 3 or 4 times. The one thing I can say to the clients is there's a form called the S501, and that you can see your fees. The city puts it on there. Most recently, we had a project of over 7,000 just for plan check, and that was an additional remodel with ADU above a garage. That's based on their new fee structure. The city actually just sent out a memo that it said that at the end of your plan check process, they're going to invoice you again, that extra plan check fee invoice and the issuance invoice. They're going to base it not from intake, like not if I submitted last year on the last year info bulletin that was maybe cheaper. No, now they're going to use this new. So that might change how much people are paying for this plan check. So it's really hard to tell you like it's going to be exactly this amount. The fee structure there's a lot of project fee types, and I can only say it just keeps increasing. It has been increasing this past year in particular.
Got it. Last question on the cost front. Is there any specific design choices during a project that can drive costs up in terms of permitting, or perhaps help your clients save costs when it comes to permitting?
So the design, we try to design that are depending on the client's budget and try to be easy to construct. A lot of the times it's a square footage base. So if you have a project that is an addition and remodel, that one is going to be a lot cheaper than doing a brand new ADU that is over a specific square footage or a new home. Because the city, for example, one of the fees says from 1,000 to 3,000 square feet. You have an amount. That amount is over $7,000. So whether you do one square foot home, let's say, to 3,000, you're paying that same amount. So there's not much leeway in there. Before it used to be broken down more. For me to be able to explain this, we will have to like have a longer conversation and pretty much walk you through the information bulletin where it shows the different fees and the ones that we usually, for the projects that we are designing, the ones that we kind of fall into.
Switching gears slightly, let's talk about the coastal zone permitting. So, what makes a coastal permit different than the ministerial permits, which we've been mostly discussing so far? So, what makes them different, number one? What's unique about them? And then, two, from the city's perspective, why are they required? Like, why do projects in the coastal zone need to go through a different permitting process that seems to me to be much more cumbersome? Like, what's their rationale for this?
The way that it works is the city has a map where it shows you the different overlays of your property. Some properties fall in the coastal overlay zone. There's various categories within the overlay zone. Some of them are just coastal height, but some of them they call it non-appealable coastal zones or appealable. Those that are under that overlay will require a coastal development permit if you're designing a brand new home. If you're doing more than 50, like let's say you have an existing home but you're demoing more than 50%, you're going to require a coastal development permit. That's kind of usually the two categories if you're changing the use as well, or if you increment parking. We have a project right now in Del Mar. That one we were able to be exempted from coastal development permit because it's an existing home and there's an addition with a remodel, but the addition is less than 50%. So that one exempts you from it. But we have another project that is in the coastal zone. There's no home on the lot. The owner purchased the property and they built two homes and split the lot. Coastal is one of them. Coastal is probably one of the easier ones. It's called Process 2. And we've done a couple of those. The most recent one actually that we did, it was like a small conversion in addition to an existing home, but because they were in the appealable zone, they require a coastal permit. We were able to do that one pretty fast. We had a really good development project manager in the city side because she was very communicative and responsive, so able to communicate with her very easily. But the thing with discretionary is it just gives you don't have the right to build that project. It's not by right. So you need a discretionary that they determine if it's okay or not okay to do this. And it's a completely separate submittal than the ministerial. The discretionary does not allow you to completely, once you get it approved, oh, I can now go build my house. No, you still have to submit the ministerial to build the home. So discretionary is at the discretion. The one project that we have, for example, the city is requesting the property owner to dedicate 2 feet of their front portion for sidewalk. They can ask for more improvements, like improve the entire sidewalk or the curb. So the requirements are completely different. It requires sometimes more consultants, not just the architect. And it's supposed to be considered like a concept type of design, which is kind of hard to do for clients because clients want to sit home. So we still go through the entire design process. And at the DD phase, our design development phase, that's when we submit before we do construction drawings. Because when you submit on the discretionary, you have to also go and do a presentation to the coastal group in the area, the planning board. They can give you comments back and you might have to redesign again. That's something that clients need to be aware of. And when it comes to a discretionary coastal development permit, which is pretty basic in San Diego, that there's chances that your project has to be redesigned depending on how it's received.
Dealing with the development services department, I'm sure it can be very challenging at points, but also the fact that if you need a coastal development permit and then you need to go in front of like a HOA or some other community type board and then present the project, those people are always very opinionated. That it just adds a lot more like uncertainty, I suppose, to the project. So that's
Yes.
certainly something people need to be aware of.
I think it's interesting. It's expensive, and you have to understand that up front. And it's really hard for an architectural company to tell you, not just us, but I believe in general, to say it's going to be this much, or I can just charge you this much. Because you can go through the entire code, design the project the way you think it will fit best the community and that everybody will like it. But like you mentioned, when you go to a community to present, they might have other opinions because they have been living there for a very long time. And it's open to not just the board presenting, but the community can come out and say, that development is going to be next to my house and it's going to, let's say, obstruct view, which is one of the big ones, especially when you're in the coastal zone, living in San Diego, where everybody wants to have this nice view to the ocean.
And just so people are aware, what neighborhoods are almost certainly going to trigger the need for a coastal development permit?
So some of the neighborhoods would be like La Jolla, Del Mar, especially if you're west of the five. Barrio Logan is one of the neighborhoods that has it, even though the coast there is more like the bay where they built the ships, but that is a coastal area, so it requires coastal zone. Or beach, I probably PV. So we always say west of the five, but to be able to confirm, we need the address of the client, look through into the cities that map that tells you and see if that overlay applies.
Then, as we begin to kind of round out the interview here, this discussion, what are some ways how would you say 1070 architecture is unique in the way that you work with your clients to make the permitting process as efficient and as stress free as you possibly can within reason? I will say, I mean, it seems talking to Sean that most clients already come prepared knowing that the permitting for their project in San Diego might be very difficult and expensive. Seems that people know. Although San Diego does seem to be particularly bad, perhaps. Talking to other architects, whether it's in Chicago or here in Denver or Miami, basically everyone seems to have a complaint with their local municipality. So this is going to be a challenge no matter where you build, but what are some things that you look to implement in your process working with clients to streamline and make the permitting process as efficient as you possibly can on your end?
I think one of the things that we do as we go into the design process is we provide information of permitting possibilities. Because sometimes the client says, I would like to add more bathrooms or more plumbing fixtures. And we usually immediately say, well, per the budget that you have, if you do that, you're going to need this other permit. Not only do you need the building permit, but you need a right-of-way permit. We let them know ahead of time. Also increases, you have to hire another consultant, we have to submit another permit process, you have to hire a different type of contractor. We try to point out to them that it will take time. We try our best to respond to the comments right away. That's one of the things that we do is as soon as we get comments, start working on the responses as fast as possible. Depending on the comments, sometimes, like I mentioned before, we have to go back to the client. When we get the comments, we tell the client, we got the comments, very simple. We'll let you know if something else comes up. We try to keep their expectations depending on the comments that we get. Fortunately, an uncertainty which we try to tell clients is that sometimes the project that seems the simplest, garage conversion, or the ones that you think should go straightforward, sometimes those are the ones that take the longest. Seems reverse, where the city's used to looking at big projects. So those are like, they kind of know how to deal with them. When you give them something smaller that they're not used to, it becomes a bigger issue, it seems. At least that's from what I see sometimes. The ones that I read the scope and I'm like, this seems so simple, it becomes a little bit of a hurdle. And I think it has to do with the location of your home. Sometimes if you are in the high fire severity zone, the city wants to make sure that your home is protected if there's a cause of fire, if you haven't brush. So sometimes that reviewer might feel that is a big deal, and talking with the reviewers and having a conversation sometimes alleviates it and makes it easier to move forward. We let the clients know so that they're aware there might be a delay on their project. Clients want, as you know, in the United States in general, once you get through the plan process, the design process, which takes time, and you go to the permitting, everybody's eager to have their home built, that they can move in. We get clients that said, you think it's going to be finished by Christmas? And sometimes, we have to be honest and say, I doubt it. It's
Yeah.
time.
Well, I'm sure they appreciate the honesty. So, last question here. Talk to me a little bit about the consulting slash on demand permitting service that you recently launched because that's, you're basically the one running that. So, talk to me about what it entails and what types of clients it is good for. The studio also, of course, does the odd commercial project here and there in San Diego. So, for example, would this fractional consulting service be good for both residential and commercial projects, as well as any other companies that might be looking to hire 1070 architecture for permitting assistance?
Yes, you are correct. We have done commercial projects, tenant improvements in the past. It helps anyone that be interested on hiring us for permit consultation. And if they want us to hire us for the permitting process, I actually have done a couple in the past. In the past, we were not doing it for projects that we were not designing. There were a few that were referred by other clients that said, can you please help my friend on this? And we have done the entire permit process for them all the way until the stamp set. So yes, it's something that we can do. And that's why we decided to launch the permit consultation, because we have been asked in the past by other colleagues, can you please do my permitting for me? A lot of architects, they don't like to do that because it's a process that can take time.
Got it. So, if you wouldn't mind going a bit deeper, like who would really benefit? You mentioned the architects, so other architecture studios, solo architects, but I imagine
Homeowners.
it's also homeowners. So, I guess from the homeowner's perspective, then, if they're in need of only the permitting assistance, does that mean how are they doing the design and the floor plans, and then how are they handling construction? Are they doing it themselves? Like, I'm trying to like kind of get in their shoes and see like what type of situations does it make a lot of sense for.
Yeah, so let's say if you have a homeowner that hire an architect or a designer, and maybe the architect or designer, they don't run their permitting, or maybe the homeowner decided, oh, I want to do it myself, but they realize it's a little bit more involved than I expected it to be. We can take it over. We have taken projects that already had started. We can take it over from that point and continue with the permitting process. There's a couple of little things that I have to do when it comes to the city side, which is change the applicant, let's say from the homeowner to myself, so I can submit their project because the system will not allow me to submit it unless I'm the applicant. We can take it from the different stages that they want. If the project just got completely designed, they have their plans, their architect or designer gave us the plans and say, can you please submit them? They can send me the information on the project, the plans, so I can determine if they're complete enough for submittal. I just would need to go through it and be able to have a consultation with them, see their plans, see what they're looking for, and determine if they need any other documentations or we're ready to start the process for submittal.
Yeah, no, the first step, if anyone is interested in that, would be to book a consultation, which we'll leave the link for in the description of this video. There's a whole calendar booking system where people can select the day and time that works for them. But I think, in conclusion, to wrap up this discussion here, it is definitely worth highlighting the fact that using the very unique permitting expertise, if you will, because we started out this conversation talking about your experience at the DSD, but then you also have experience, of course, doing this for clients in your current role, but you've also worked, alongside Sean on several of your own self-funded development projects. So you've seen things permitting wise from the city's perspective, your client's perspective, as well as the homeowner's perspective. So because of that, I think that gives you a very unique qualification to handle people's permitting. And Sean does say you are the best permitting specialist in the entire city. He is a
It
bit
does.
biased, I think, but something people should definitely consider, I would say. Like I said, we will leave the link to book that consultation for permitting directly here. Anything you would like to say to wrap up what people should know about permitting, anything we didn't cover, things like that.
Well, first, yeah, maybe Sean might be a little bit biased because, we've been working together for a very long time and I took over the projects for ourselves and I did the permitting for it. He seemed completely oblivious to it. And for some reason, I find it in a way kind of easy. It could be frustrating, but at times you were like, oh, you feel bad for the client sometimes. Unfortunately, it's a necessary thing that we need to do and kind of enjoy is almost like a puzzle piece for me. So I do enjoy that. And like you mentioned, being there, I see how things move around. Besides that, the permit consultation is a great way to start talking to us or to me to see if you would like to hire us for just permitting consultation or navigating through the permitting process, submitting your projects. It's a process. And a lot of the times, I think the misconception for some clients is, oh, it's online and I can do it myself. Yes, you can. But when I've explained to some clients, they have asked, is that something that I can do? And we say, yes, you can do it for your own project if you prefer. Even if we're other designers, as soon as you start explaining the steps, they get, oh, I didn't realize it was going to be like this. The steps are a little bit complicated. The software is not like the pretty looking software. You have to kind of learn how to use it, and the communication back and forth with the reviewers, if they're missing documentation, if they're late for 30 days, more to the permitting process that people probably don't see. So it's something that most people think could be a lot easier, which yes, it should be a lot easier. And it used to be a lot easier, at least that's what I hear from past architects that have retired. In some jurisdictions, like in other parts of the United States, I've heard people say it's easier. In other states, it's still always for the architect, the developer, or the homeowner. Once you get to it, you realize it is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. There's always something that comes up. And I remember traveling with Sean to Ireland a few years back, and we were talking to one of his family members that used to work at a development services type of department there. And we were talking about a difficulty here in the United States and in San Diego, it's difficult to go through the permitting process. He goes, it's the same here. So it is pretty much same everywhere.
Very interesting. All right, I think that does it for this discussion, but it was very informative. So thank you for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, and then we will see you in the next one.
Thank you.